New Photic Realm announcement. Submission windows for upcoming issues. Issue 10, the theme is justice. That's hard-boiled fiction with a supernatural twist. The deadline for that will be April 1st, 2020. Issue 11, the theme is kaiju, giant monsters terrorizing civilization. Deadline will be October 1st, 2020 for those stories. Issue 12, the theme is lycanthropy, which is, of course, self-explanatory. It can be any type of animorph with a bloody twist. So I guess that's werewolves and Jesus, giant, I don't know. What do people turn into? Seals? I've just got a little seal on my desk, so I thought of that. I don't know. You'll have to be more imaginative than I just was. But the deadline for lycanthropy, January 1st, 2021. Good luck to everyone submitting.
I wrote this thing. I hope you like it. Let's talk about it, yeah. Let's lose track. Losing the Plot Podcast. Losing the Plot Podcast. Losing the Plot Podcast. Talking to Leo.
My guest this episode is Jonathan Fortin. He's the author, most recently of LILITU, Memoirs of a Succubus. It's a novel out now with Crystal Lake Publishing. It's set to be the start of a trilogy if everything goes well. It's great. It's like a Victorian era gothic fantasy that explores contemporary themes such as gender issues and body and sexuality, and it's a lot, gives you a lot to think about. I really hope that you will check the book out. I hope that you enjoy my conversation with Jonathan. If you are, if you want to be on the show, if you want to tell me anything about the show, you can always get in touch with me using losingtheplotpodcast-at-gmail-dot-com. And I look forward to hearing from you. But that's all from me for the intro chat. So here is the conversation I had with Jonathan Fortin. How's your day going?
Oh, it's good. It's good. Is it really late for you over there?
It's 9 p.m., but it's still light outside. So
that's cool. You're in Norway?
I am. I live in Stavanger, though I'm from the UK.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I visited Oslo back in 2017, I think. I really liked it there. I'm here in California, so.
Okay, cool. But what took you all the way to, I suppose, Europe, right? Did you see Norway? Did you see other places?
So I went to both Sweden and Norway because well, first of all, I wanted to visit Europe, and I'm really into metal and Vikings, and that's the place to go for that. I also had online friends in both countries and understood that it was pretty easy to find English speakers in them, and lots of things I wanted to see, like in Stockholm, there's this place called Skansen where there's lemurs that can climb on you and stuff. It's like an open lemur enclosure, and I really love lemurs, so I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go to Sweden to see lemurs, and just a random thing, but it was just a lot of little things.
That's wild. Yeah, cool. But you're from San Francisco?
Yes, or more specifically Oakland, but more or less.
Okay. Cool. I've heard that's a lovely place.
It's kind of mixed because it was lovely about a decade ago, or a little bit a little bit later. Basically what happened was the tech industry boomed, and we became ridiculously overpopulated with an insane housing crisis, a pretty much entirely broken economy. The only way you can, not be living I'm living in a house with 6 people right now. And the only way you can either not be living in a house with, 7 people or living with your parents well into your 30s or 40s is if you work for a tech company, because there's so many billionaires and millionaires who live here, and they just kind of ruin it for everyone else.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, you must have seen that shift then, having lived there your whole life.
Definitely, it completely changed, and it got much more crowded. And I graduated from college just as the job market had, the 2009 recession. Because I graduated in 2010, and so definitely I was starting to see the impacts of that pretty much just at that point, and then they kind of only got worse, not better. And all the fun, like a lot of people left, and all the kind of fun, cool, alternative, weird shit that made San Francisco what it was started to disappear because no one could afford it. And now with the coronavirus, everything's fucked.
Oh no. Okay, because that was going to be my next point. It's quite a cool, like, hipster place, Oakland.
In some ways, it's interesting because like you'll have like the hipster vegan juice bar where they'll sell $30 avocado toast, and then literally right down the street there will be like 50 homeless tents. And it's kind of like they try to have the upscale stuff right next to they'll have all that right next to the places where people are genuinely struggling and would never be able to afford any of that. And so it's all just kind of this huge clash of completely different economic standings, and a lot of it is we have a huge problem of gentrification here, basically, where the people who were here before are being thrown out of their homes and not being able to afford the places that are being erected instead, because there are poor people who make over 6 figures a year. So, which I realize probably doesn't make sense if you're not an American, don't know how what our economy is like here, but it's messy. I'll put it that way.
I mean, I get the impression. It seems like it's all I read on Twitter. It used to be the place for like funny 140 character jokes. Now it's all just like billionaire anger. So
yeah, pretty much. I really find Twitter hard to be on, just specifically writer Twitter, because it is always so depressingly political, and it's important stuff to talk about. And I usually agree with what I'm reading. It's just for a mental health standpoint, it's just kind of like, this isn't fun.
Yeah, it transforms so quickly, though. It genuinely isn't a fun place to be anymore. And I don't think that it's like, I don't know how you sell books on Twitter. I don't know if it's even worth it for that. I think you just have a handle to keep publishers happy and then don't use it. That would be my advice.
Yeah, that's probably, I mean, that's probably accurate. I mean, it's like I try to post things. I'm never able to get too many Twitter followers. It's like I'll see some people and they'll get, they'll have thousands, and I've never been able to get that many. And it's like on some social media, I'll get more followers. So I've been, having more luck on like Facebook or Instagram, just because I tend to get more followers on there. But I guess my tweets aren't that interesting.
Nobody knows. I got more when I had some legitimate publications, and then I figured it was because people wanted me to help them do that, and I was like, oh man, this is a racket.
Yeah,
but
it's a circle jerk.
Really
Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to use that word on your thing.
You can use whatever word you want, and also I edit this later, so just say whatever the hell you want. I will cut it. I've heard some people have been fortunate enough to tell me some incredibly egregious things that I just snipped right out because I'm interested only in the interesting stuff, but not drama at all. So feel free to say
I don't want to have a tabloid
anything you like. You're safe with me.
Jonathan Fortin used the word clusterfuck. Oh God.
It was circle jerk actually, but now you've used clusterfuck also.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Got a whole bag of this shit.
since we were talking about it, we started talking about Auckland and stuff. You have this interest in dressing like a Victorian gent. Is there like particular clubs that you can do that in?
Yeah, so there's I'll go to goth clubs, and then there's also like Victorian events, like there's this thing called the Dickens Fair. There's the Edward Gorey Ball. There's various places where people will dress up in period clothing and then waltz or whatever. And I tend to hang out with a lot of goths and alternative people. And the Bay Area, fortunately, does still have a lot of alternative events and a sizable enough alternative scene, even if most people in it are struggling. So I and a couple of friends of mine will sometimes dress up all in like pretty aristocratic or like gothic Lolita outfits, and then we'll get tea at like tea shops, or they'll have all the the pretty aesthetic Victorian home where they will serve you tea and then various biscuits and crumpets and all that stuff. And so it's all very fun. I don't dress up like that every day. I certainly don't, go out on the street and be like, I'm going to go flaunt this Victorian outfit in the middle of Oakland. I'll show up to specific events where I won't feel self-conscious about dressing up that way.
Yeah, of course. Is this something you always did? Were you a goth at school and then you just stayed a goth?
It's like I identified as a goth pretty much most of my life, but I didn't really dress up I didn't really dress up gothic back in high school or middle school and all that, just because I didn't have the money to spend on the clothes, and I wasn't really interested in doing that. So it was more just kind of like, I'm a goth because I know that I'm dark and tormented and interested in stuff. And then like later on, when I was in college, I was like, oh wait, what if I actually started dressing up that way? That would be actually pretty cool. And then so yeah, it's always been kind of there.
And how about the interest in Victorian literature?
Of course, yes. It's like not everything. I'm not as scholarly about that as I would like, just because there's some things that age better than others. Of course, Dickens and Wilkie Collins and all that. And of course, a lot of neo-Victorian literature stuff where it's written from modern day, but about the Victorian era. So, for example, one that I really got into was The Meaning of Night by Michael Cox. I think that was really one of the things that really awakened a lot of my interests in that. Drood by Dan Simmons was also very good. And of course, right when I was getting into all that stuff, that's when steampunk became a thing, and now that airship sailed by now, but it's but for a while that was part of that too, and then everyone just kind of got like, I guess a little sick of that, and I was like, you know what, but Victorian Gothic is still cool, so.
And what is it that has captivated you about that era?
So I think that it's kind of visually very interesting in some ways, in terms of the outfits, in terms of the Gothic architecture. There's just kind of a general spookiness, but also psychologically, it's very interesting as well. And this is something that I get a lot into in my book, LILITU, the Memoirs of a Succubus. It's set in the Victorian era, so it does have that aesthetic. But the main reason why I set it there was more because of the Victorian viewpoints on gender and sexuality and repression, and I was very interested in exploring the gender roles of the period, and just kind of exposing that, because there's so many times where you'll talk to people that are like, oh yes, I wish that I was born in the Victorian times. I wasn't born. I was born in the wrong era. And then you're like,
yeah,
dude, no, it was horrible back then. So,
yeah.
I mean, when I was planning to like write a book about succubi and incubi, and I ended up deciding to set it in the Victorian era because I thought that having succubi and incubi if you're having something that's specifically about them, it generally, if you want to have any depth and not just be porn, there has to be an element of exploring sexuality and gender, and to set that in an era where these things are extremely strict and where everyone grows up with Madonna whore complexes and where, sexualized women are generally punished, then to have a main character who is a succubus, but also a heroic succubus, flies in the face of that and kind of, inevitably has to navigate the difficulties of that culture, as well as this being a culture that she grew up in. So both outside and within, psychologically, what she's dealing with.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the cover here, and it seems like, did you advise on that? Because she's got a very Victorian style dress.
Oh yes, no, I did. So I'm very finicky about cover art, and
Okay.
I was a little when I sent it in and got my publisher and all that. I was like, okay, if I can talk to the cover artist directly, I would appreciate being able to do so, because I want to make sure that we don't get a cover where it's just like, here's a bunch of cleavage and then a naked McMahon chest, and then I was just like, I don't, that's not what I want. I want something that portrays this as being like this epic, dark, gothic fantasy, and also because it's all very visually distinctive in my head, I wanted to make sure that came through the cover. So when it came time for us to get in touch with the cover artist, Crystal Lake Publishing allowed me to talk with him directly. His name's Ben Baldwin, and he was like, hey, so what are you thinking of? And I'm like, okay, here's what I'm picturing. And I gave him a couple different ideas, and he's like, cool, let's try this. And then he gave me this sketch of what he was thinking, and I was like, okay, that's awesome, and maybe we can do this slight adjustment to her face or something like that. He's like, okay, great, and was just super accommodating. And so we ended up with something that I think all of us were super happy with. I am overjoyed with how the cover looks personally. So yeah.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. And what is it? So is there much like literature on succubi already, or is this like it's mostly like a pornographic thing, or
there's
what
not
references
a lot of,
do you have?
There are some books about succubi and incubi. I don't want to say there's a lot of good ones. There are some, but I've read a lot of bad ones. There aren't as many books about them as there are about vampires and or werewolves or mummies or angels or whatever. And I think one of the reasons why is that they're a little more explicit about what vampires are more symbolic about, because when you have vampires often represent sex, but they really feed off of blood, versus succubi and incubi in particular feed through sex. So through exploring that in a way that isn't pornographic is something that I think a lot of people were kind of just like, I don't really know how to do that. And I'm like, okay, but I'm just going to be looking at this from the standpoint of exploring society's attitudes about sex, exploring, how, and also about gender, as well as a lot of focus on the more mythological and folkloric aspects of succubi and incubi that often overlooked. So like, if you look at like a typical succubus book, a lot of the times they don't enter dreams. They won't have wings or horns or any of the other, cool things that make them what they are. Versus like listen to a black metal album or see like a, art of succubi. They always look very demonic. And I'm like, okay, I want my succubi to be, somewhat demonic, still humanized, but I want them to be able to enter dreams, and I want to have a lot of cool dream shit. So, like the main character, Morena, ends up training to fight within dreams, kind of Matrix style. She still has to build up her body muscle outside in the real world, but because, in dream time, it moves at a different rate, she can get months training within weeks. Just, from building up her muscle memory while she's in the dream world. So a lot of cool shit like that.
Yeah. I noticed that you say that this series is going to explore how nightmares are normalized in oppressive societies.
Yes, and that's very much a case. So with LILITU, the Memoirs of a Succubus, one of the early things that happens in the story is demons, vampires, and other dark creatures more or less take over Victorian England. And so the upper class becomes demons, the people who weren't already, and the lower classes remain mortal and are enslaved. So as a result, a lot of nightmarish things become normalized. However, at the same time, all the other horrible Victorian stuff that was there already never really went away. So it's more just kind of taken things that were already there and then making them more obvious. So there was already classism, there was already sexism, there was already child labor in the factories. And now it's just more obvious because the people that are in charge of it all are literal demons.
Right.
But because we have all these various monsters running around, it means that there's a lot of, dark magic. There's dark bloody rituals. There's a lot of dark crumbling castles. There's tentacles. It's all it's all very twisted.
So did you do much like explicit research, or was it just mainly based on things that you had happened to read as a reader already?
I did have to do a lot of research, just because inevitably, when you're trying to make sure something feels authentically Victorian, you're going to encounter a lot of. There's going to be a lot of times where you're like, "Wait, was that invented yet?" And also, realistically, how would this work? And so there's a lot of little things that I encountered that I tried to, incorporate without it distracting from the story too much, if it didn't, help prove my point. But also there's a lot of things inevitably where you can't quite. It can be tricky to find the answers that you're looking for, unless you're really thorough. So, like, for example, I was interested in there was a character who is a black woman, and I wanted to explore the experience of people of color in Victorian England. I didn't end up doing very much of that just because it wasn't my place to do it, but I still wanted to mention or at least touch on that. But when I was trying to research the experiences of people of color in Victorian England, I found that there weren't as many sources on that as I was hoping. And because they were around, there were a lot of black people there. It's just that when you try to research it, there's not a lot of information that can be easily or readily accessible, at least not that I was able to find, because those people weren't people that were being given a voice. You find photos, but it's frustrating, the things that we don't know and the experiences that we're not being given glimpses of.
Yeah, interesting. And I see also that Anne Rice seems to have been an influence here.
Yes, to an extent. Just because I think that basically with Vampire Chronicles, Anne Rice was very much interested in trying to humanize the vampire and psychologically explore what it would actually be like if someone became a vampire. And that's very much what I'm doing with Succubi and Incubi. In this case, there's also a similar, Gothic historical aspect. Mine's LILITU is a little more action heavy than Vampire Chronicles. And unlike with Vampire Chronicles, my characters are never going to find Jesus at the end, which is kind of taken with Lestat, which a lot of us are not quite very happy with.
And this is going to be a whole series.
Yes. Right now I'm planning on a trilogy, just because I have other things I want to work on as well. I haven't. I'm not too far into book 2 yet. I'm juggling a couple other projects, and but there will be a series. I do have plans for the sequel. I do have the rough skeleton. It's just right now my brain's kind of focused on some other stuff. So I don't know exactly when the next book will be out, I'm afraid. And I'm not certain how many books it's going to be in total, just because when you're working on it, whenever you're working on a big series, I find you can plan things out all you want, but sometimes things don't go how you plan. Sometimes characters don't, do what you want them to. And sometimes you underestimate how much time some subplots will need to really develop. So it's like I have, the structure, and I have lots and lots of ideas, and I know generally how they're all going to take shape. It's just the actuality of actually writing it, things may evolve. That's just the reality of writing.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, you don't know what those books are until you sit down to write them. So, yeah. I see also that there was a lot of musical inspiration when you were writing this book.
Yes, that's correct. So I listened to a lot of movie soundtracks. I listened to a lot of French neoclassical when I was writing it. There was there's a couple bands like Virgin Black and Alend and Dark Sanctuary, but I also ended up just coming up with this whole soundtrack for it, where I had to. There were a lot of things I wanted to include, but I didn't, because I tried to keep it at like however whatever length you could have for it being a disc, like a movie soundtrack. So some things it's like the lyrics are appropriate, but a lot of the time it's also just the feel, or there's like a scene where in my head I can see it playing, or if this was a movie,
Yeah. Who would direct it?
That would be hard to answer because my favorite director is Guillermo del Toro. So obviously, if we get someone like him, that would be amazing. But of course, he has this massive list of projects, so it's hard to picture that happening.
Sure, but you can still have a dream director. That's allowed.
Yeah.
So is this the first novel that you've ever written?
That's not the first novel I've ever written. It's the first that I've had published, and it's the first that was worth publishing. Because inevitably I wrote my first novel trilogy when I was in high school, and it wasn't good. It was good for someone who was in middle school, high school, but as far as being something that I would try to publish now as an adult, no.
The thing is, like, it doesn't. The thing I noticed now is, like, either you write something that's good enough to get published or you don't, but either way you will look back at it cringing. So it doesn't really matter one way or another.
Yeah. I mean, it's like inevitably there's always going to be some things where you're like, that's not entirely how I want it to be. But, after a certain point, you got to accept that it's never going to be 100% perfect in every respect. One thing I noticed as well a lot while editing books is, when you seem to fix one problem, you introduce others. So, like, I'm editing another novel right now. It's unrelated to LILITU. It's I'm basically working on the second draft, and I have this whole list of all the changes I want to make. And sometimes it's like you need to add this scene or add this snippet of conversation to this scene that's already written, and then I'll try to do it and trying to make it fit in organically, and it doesn't work. And so I'll be like, but it feels like it's really important, but then it just ends up causing more problems than it ends up being worth. And then you're like, maybe I should just focus on what it already was when it felt more organic, because trying to make all these changes that feel less organic can take away from, the reality of what this is. It makes it slightly less true.
Oh, definitely. I think that, like, if you're far enough removed from a project, you can look back at it and be like, well, I wouldn't have written that now. And then you're like, well, maybe that's the point.
That's a good point too. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. It's you're just we're always just doing our best. I don't know.
And we're all changing.
Yeah, definitely. That's yeah. You attended Clarion West in 2012.
It wasn't Clarion West. It was just the Clarion writing workshop. Clarion West is the one in Seattle, versus just the Clarion workshop is the one that's in San Diego.
Oh,
It's
okay,
weird
okay. Yeah.
because they're both on the West Coast, but I think like originally the workshop wasn't in San Diego. But yes, I did attend that in 2012. So I had just graduated from college, like like a year before, and was we had so for people that haven't don't know about Clarion, it's a 6-week writing workshop focused on science fiction and fantasy, and every week you write a short story with the other 17 students who get in, and they all critique it, and you critique theirs. And every week there's also a professional writer in residence who also critiques it, and generally drives the direction of that week. And so we had Ted Chiang, we had Holly Black and Cassandra Clare, we had Delia Sherman, Walter John Williams, and Jeffrey Ford. And so it's of course we had some really amazing writers, both in the workshop as well as teaching us. And I think at that time LILITU had just I had it in some early draft, and I was trying to get an agent, but I couldn't. It was too long, and I don't think I was mature enough as a writer to really recognize some of the flaws that were in the manuscript at the time. I kind of wish that I'd gone to Clarion when I was a little older, but in some ways, I also think that going there probably grew me up. If that makes any sense. Because I was a much better writer, it just also was emotionally very, very taxing. I think by week 4, everyone wants to kill themselves because it's just you gotta learn to develop thick skin there, because every week you're tearing each other's stories apart. So.
Right. So what, you sit in a circle of 17 people and they all just tell you you're bad?
18 people. Well, it's because it's 17 plus yourself. But yeah, pretty much. But except then there's, for some stories, then there's oh my God, I love this. This was so good. I might suggest this one tiny thing, or it might be I've got nothing. So every so often you'll get those. So it kind of, everyone gets oh, come on, I just want a story people love. I just want to write a story people love. Come on.
Yeah.
But that's usually not what happens. Socially, it was a little challenging for me as well, because when you're around the same 18 people nonstop for 6 weeks, their dynamics can form, and it can be socially challenging for if you don't entirely fit in.
Who else was there? Is there any other students that we know of?
Yeah, no, there's a couple who've gone on to be very successful. Sam J. Miller was one of the other students. Carmen Maria Mercado, Lara Elena Donnelly. There was a bunch of others, but those are the ones that have had the novels and the awards and all that. So
yeah. That's cool. I didn't know you were there at the same time as them. I've wanted to interview Sam as well. I've started to chat to him about that. I know that he seemed to love it and was very sad after it ended. Was that?
Oh yeah.
How did it work for you? Not the same.
No, I was kind of glad to go home, just because I think for he and a lot of the other people there, I think really connected extremely well with each other, and I really wanted to be a part of that. And there were some people who were very nice to me, and we've all kept in touch, but in general, there wasn't. I kind of wish that I was a little more of a mature emotional level when I'd gone there, because I think I took to heart things that I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And I think emotionally just was very, very just kind of miserable through a lot of it, because I just really wanted to fit in better than I did. And I wanted people to like my books better than they did, and I wasn't ready. So, but
That's
it is what it
fair.
is.
I mean, I asked so much about it because I've been thinking about doing it myself at some point, if they'll let me. But also, like, I don't know. It's nice to hear your perspective, because I think all of us tend to dream that somewhere there's a group of like your people hanging out without you, and I always assume mine are at that workshop. So, but maybe they're not, you know.
You should totally go. It's you'll be a much better writer for it, and I think that for, if those are your people, if you go the right year, then those are writing contacts that you have forever. So I mean, it's like I think a lot of people there have there were definitely some people there who, in the year I went with, who I'm obviously I'm still in touch with everyone. We're all still going to be writing contacts. There's some people who will actually, are a little friendlier to me than others. But it is what it is.
That's just an accurate description of life in general, I think. But yeah, how about in Oakland? Do you hang out with other writers there?
Yeah, no, I used to have a writing group, and now I'm in a different writing group with some of the same people. And we, so for about 7 years, so I went to San Francisco State University, right? And part of, I mean, so when I went there, I found that a lot of times the university didn't really, the creative writing department was not fond of science fiction, fantasy, or horror. Like, there were some really amazing like English classes. Like, there was a English class specifically about vampires. There was a comparative world literature class about fantasy. The creative writing department, not so much. They were less about sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. So me and a bunch of other disgruntled sci-fi, fantasy writers all ended up forming a writing group together, and we were meeting for a good 7 years, and then it just kind of fell apart because people weren't be able to make the obligations. Now we've recently formed a new one with some new people, and some of the people from the old one, and some of the other people from the old one I'm still meeting for like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. So just there is a community here. There's some people who I know, and there's lots of people I don't.
I've heard Dungeons and Dragons can be quite a good like creative exercise.
Oh yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. If you're with creative people who you can kind of build off things with, you all have like the right energy, because like if the creative energy isn't right, and it's just not gelling, that's one thing, versus like if you're with a lot of people and they're willing to just say yes and then make it even more ridiculous in some way. It can be very fun. So like we have this we're doing a Curse of Strahd campaign. This is actually my first Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and we've been doing it for sometime since last year, and we're just encountering all sorts of crazy things and having all sorts of ridiculous adventures, and I'm sure some of it's from the book, but some of it I think is just pretty organic to what our group is about. So.
I see also that you do some voice acting.
Yes, yeah. So I go to I go to a voice acting school in Sausalito called Voice Tracks, and I've been going there for about 4 years now, and I also audition on a website called Voice 123. And Voice Tracks has been a really amazing place as far as being able to, let me stretch my acting muscles while also learning a lot and making contacts. I love the voiceover community. I find a lot of it is very, very kind, very helpful. And of course, I could say the same thing about a lot of people I know in the local writing community as well. But like, right now things are a little weird for voiceover just because of Corona. Everything's kind of on hold, just like with everything else.
Yeah.
But it's always something that I really enjoy doing because I love acting, but I just don't always have the time commitment, and I don't always like wearing makeup, and I have long hair, and a lot of male roles want you to cut your hair, and I don't really want to do that, and I don't have to do it with voiceover, so.
Nice. But have you done like other theater stuff or?
Yeah, I did. I've done theater. I've been in a couple short student films. I've never been in a feature. I would like to someday. And it's always been the sort of thing where like haven't done a ton of actual paid acting work just because I also have my writing and I also have my day job, and juggling 3 professional careers is tricky. But I've been doing what I can to try and slowly escalate my voiceover career as I feel ready. It's like I'm not trying to. I was like, okay, I'm not going to audition yet because I don't feel like I can perform at the professional enough level that I want to quite yet.
Yeah.
But now I'm at that point where I'm starting to feel more comfortable doing that, so I'm doing a lot more auditioning. And I got cast in a couple small video game roles.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's been fun.
That's really cool. Like with anything creative, there's always a way to just invert it and punish yourself. So like you can start off being like, hey, I really think voice acting is fun, and then in a few weeks you can be like, I haven't voice acted in days, I'm worthless, I don't deserve to voice act. And then you're like, what?
Yeah, it's hard.
I don't know, but I think to any creative listening, I would just recommend just don't go there. There's nothing for you. Like there's nothing productive for you in that headspace. Just stay out of it as much as possible.
Yeah, it's the same with writing, but weirdly enough, they've both been helpful in helping the other, because one thing that's a mantra with voiceover is it's selection, not rejection. So when you don't win that audition, it's possible that you could have done a grade A performance, but it's just for whatever reason not what they were looking for, or it's so for example, you have 2 talking hamsters in a commercial, and they settle on one particular kind of voice for hamster A. But hamster B, they want a voice that most contrasts with the other one. So maybe they go for the voice for hamster B that, went in a completely different direction than the direction you were going, but that doesn't mean your direction was any less valid. It's just that a matter of balance. And I think that the same definitely applies to publications when you're trying to get like your short story published, because maybe you're trying to get into an anthology, and maybe they have too many other stories in that anthology with kind of the same general vibe, and they're trying to create as much diversity as possible there. So
yeah, no, it definitely applies. It's not rejection doesn't mean that you did anything bad. And also I've heard that like with acting auditions and so on, your job is just to demonstrate what you do rather than to get the part, because getting the part is out of your control, but demonstrating your prowess is something you can do.
Oh yeah, and totally. And another thing about that is if even if you don't get that part, they might call you in for a completely different part because they liked what you were doing. I mean, that's what happened with one of the video game things that I did. So I'd auditioned for one part, and then they're like, okay, we're going with someone else for this one. But then 6 months later, then they're like, hey, so we'd like to talk to you about a different part, and and got me for that one. So
that's cool. So I've gone through all my questions. Is there anything else you want to let us know about? We don't know when the next book is coming out, but this one is available now.
Yes, LILITU, The Memoirs of a Succubus, is available now. Yeah, it's a gothic dark fantasy saga that explores succubi and incubi in Victorian England, and hopefully people who read it will enjoy it.
Fantastic. I certainly did. So I can,
great.
I wouldn't be talking to you unless, I wanted to recommend it to listeners. I think it's super intricate, well-detailed world. And like you see, you found an interesting way to explore contemporary themes in like a unique past setting that you're obviously very passionate about. So,
well, thank you so much, Leo. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
LILITU, Memoirs of a Succubus is out now with Crystal Lake Publishing. I hope you will check it out. If you want to be on the show, if you want to tell me something about the show, you can always get in touch with me using losingtheplotpodcast-at-gmail-dot-com. I look forward to hearing from you as always. But that's all from me for this episode. So until next time, bye bye.